All right, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody, to our very first of our little Zest sessions, which are going to be lunchtime talks on raising happy, healthy children. I'm Dr. Haley Hellstern, and I have Dr. Maritza Quattrone with me here today, as well as Laura Cordero with Nourish to Thrive. And today we are going to be talking about ways to boost our immune systems through food and sleep and vaccines and all sorts of other fun stuff. So thanks again for joining us. I'm going to let Laura introduce herself briefly and we'll get started.
All right. Welcome, everyone, and I'm happy to be here. And just a little bit about myself. I have been a dietitian for almost 25 years this year, and it's been an exciting journey. And I have a private practice called Nourish to Thrive, but I have been working with kids in the pediatric realm over the last 8 years in a couple different areas. I'm so happy to be joining the doctors today and joining Zest in the Zest way and focusing on the whole package for your child. So let's get started with food and how we can talk about food for ourselves, our kids, and how to stay healthy throughout this sick season, which hopefully we're coming out of it, but we still want to build our immunities up, right? So let's focus on the foods. You can go ahead to the next slide.
Oh, there we go.
All right. So one of the things we want to think about is not just like the immediate, like when you're feeling sick. You want to think about the big picture. So incorporating some different foods, and these are just going to be a small picture of what we want to talk about, but thinking about in the line of berries. Now, in our area in Pittsburgh, we know, or even in the northern part of the US, we may not get some of these fresh berries more towards the summer, but we can still include them whether you want to garden and freeze them or whether you want to buy frozen ones and use them in different ways. But what these berries are, and you see that vibrant color, is they're packed with antioxidants. And what that means is that they fight and build, well, they build our immune system, and they can actually reduce inflammation in the body. So we'll come back to how we can incorporate them in a few minutes. Go ahead, next slide.
Laura, can I ask a quick question that
Sure.
I get asked a lot? And I think I know the answer to, but worth checking. You mentioned frozen. Is there any big difference between fresh and frozen berries and other foods in terms of the nutrition that they give us?
I'll be honest, this time of year, or as we're getting into more, seasonal fruit that we might get more locally, when they pick the berries to freeze, they're picking them at their peak ripeness. So they're freezing them actually at their peak ripeness versus when they're traveling across country, across country lines. We get a lot of things from Chile, Canada, other country, Mexico. So when they flash freeze them, they actually can be preserving more of the nutrients.
Okay, so we're not losing the antioxidants and vitamins and things like that in the freezing thawing process.
No.
Great to know. Thanks. All
Yeah.
right, I'll move on to the next slide.
Okay. And we all, so many people know focus on vitamin C, and I'm going to touch on that both in food and in a couple slides regarding like how the forms of that people take vitamin C. But these are, we think about the citrus. Now, you might put lemons or limes in water or something like that. Oranges, clementines are great this time of year, but we can also get vitamin C in some vegetables such as bell peppers, broccoli, and many, like even spinach. So many other fruits and vegetables. So think colors of the rainbow. And also, even to the point of starchy vegetables like as far as potatoes and sweet potatoes. So this is one of our more powerful antioxidants. We will talk a little bit about supplement form in a few minutes. So go ahead to the next slide. And we can't talk about immune system without talking about the deep green vegetables. These are filled with nutrients such as vitamin A, vitamin C, and many other things like folate. So that's a B vitamin. But for our immune system, these nutrients that are found in these vegetables pack a real punch. So, and support our immunity. So go ahead, the next slide. Now let's shift the gears into a couple different off of the color of the rainbow and focus on how omega-3s that are primarily found in fish, and that's the form, the EPA and the DHA, which our body utilizes the best. Now there are plant-based forms such as in flax seeds and chia seeds and a few other and walnuts, but the form of omega-3 can help reduce the inflammation while actually supporting the immune function. So sometimes for kids, fish aren't a big fan, but we'll talk a little bit of ways maybe we can incorporate some fish. So next slide.
Lennon ate a whole 1.5 salmon fillets last night.
Oh, see?
Oh,
And I
Yeah.
think it starts with that exposure by providing it and sometimes different ways of making things. I think flavor is a big thing. So even when you're preparing fish, sometimes it might have that fishy smell, but if we're baking it or if we're preparing it with a more of an aroma, then that is something that we can keep into the rotation. So
The Trader
um,
Joe's salmon rub powder is so good. I just put
there you
tons of
go.
it on top. It's
There
so
you go.
easy.
Yes. And I
So
think,
we have
yeah,
somebody joining us, so I'm gonna
yeah.
try to admit her. Okay.
Okay.
Hello
Welcome.
and welcome. We are recording and we are talking about fish right now and about to move on to nuts and seeds. Feel free to interrupt us though if you have any questions.
Okay. And so another one, we commonly people think about taking zinc and to build that immune system, but we want to be cautious with the amount of like in the supplements, which I'll touch on in a second, but ways to get zinc in is through a lot of these seeds. Also, it's going to be found in your protein foods. Pumpkin seeds are a great source, walnuts, sunflower seeds, almonds. So those walnuts are also have that plant-based form of omega-3s. And for like kids who are like more like athletes, pumpkin seeds are a great form of magnesium. So it does dual power. Today we're just focusing on the immune system, but there's so many other benefits to some of these nuts and seeds, including those healthy fats and satiety. And they're a nice crunchy thing for kids to kind of snack on too. So again, we're focusing on how to bring it all together. So we can go to the next slide.
Can I ask another quick question, Laura? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. No, that's
You
fine.
have some recommendations. So thinking about nuts, especially for the younger kiddos, like the under 4 or 5 year olds, for how to safely serve things like almonds
Yep.
and cashews that might otherwise
Yep.
be hazards. What do you recommend?
Yep. Actually, let's go to the next slide and I'll
Oh,
have the
perfect.
visuals to show
You
you how I would suggest
Okay,
that.
perfect.
Yeah. So those two top pictures are great examples. So crushing, I talk to parents a lot about grinding, crushing. You can start with flax seeds because it's like almost, it's not a powder, so to say, but it's really fine. Whereas like using a rolling pin, get some aggression out, have some fun with some nuts, grind them up. You can use a food processor if you want, but why not have some fun, right? So
Sure.
in the process, so those walnuts, those almonds, you can crush them, you can make them into smaller. So those yogurt parfaits, not only are you getting the benefits of like the calcium and the vitamin D, which is another nutrient that's important, you can also get that granola nutty type of flavor along with those berries. Now, of course, for any kiddos that have allergies to nuts, that is where I focus on seeds. So even though those energy bites you might think of like almond butter or peanut butter, sunflower butter can be incorporated. Pumpkin butter is a little bit more of a refined. It might not be as sticky, but adding in flaxseed in that or chia seeds in those energy bites along with you see like those dried fruits or sometimes kids like coconut flakes, things like that, oatmeal. So those energy bites is a great way for like the littles to get some more of that pastier type of benefits versus the chewing the nuts. Now when they're a little bit older, then you got trail mix, and especially for kids who are going into youth sports and things like that, like I like to use this trail mix at certain times of the day. And so you're packing a punch for your immune system, but you're also going to be benefiting like any activity. And we talk about timing. So about that. Smoothies are another great option. So putting flaxseed in smoothies, putting chia seeds in smoothies, or those overnight oats, that's another great easy thing. But this is also, see that green smoothie can put some avocado. You can put some spinach. The orange, we think of like orange flavors and the berry, the pink one more like the berries, but there's so many different flavors of smoothies that you can make. And it doesn't have to be a day-to-day thing. Sometimes it's a fun treat for kids. Sometimes we think about it more in the summertime and then in the wintertime. But I would almost say smoothies in the wintertime is more beneficial for the immune system than wait till the summer. So now for that fish. Yes, a tuna fish sandwich, doctor it up a little bit. Or put tuna on a salad for some of the older kids, that type of thing. But little things like how, like you mentioned, Lennon had some salmon, some of that steakier fish that has a little bit more robust like taste might be a good start. But some of the blander ones, like like a white flaky fish, can definitely be part of it. And that's the thing that we focus on with the littler kids is that exposure. So they might not be trying those fish tacos, but it's still something that, we can always kind of rotate in different ways of getting fish. And the flavoring is a great example of how to do that. So
This is great. It's making me realize that I think fish is one of the things that my kids haven't been routinely exposed to, here and there. But these are some great ways I might try to incorporate at home as well, and just trying to bring some of that fish into our homes more.
Yeah.
Hard in Pittsburgh, though. It's hard, but I grew up
Yeah,
in we had Woolies everywhere.
Yeah, I was just gonna say we don't always make it down to this trip to Woolies, but I mean that's a great way. But it is, hey, for anyone who is honoring Lent right now, Fish Fridays. It doesn't always have to be a fried fish. They could do a baked fish or something like that. Cod is actually a great fish. It's just how it's prepared. But the nutrient value in cod is very high in omega-3s. So, so Fish Fridays is not bad. It's we can maybe mix up the preparation. So yeah. So we can move to the next slide and I'll touch on some supplements. So what I wanted to kind of touch on, and I think we're all on the same page when we talk about this, is that supplements are a supplement. Supplements are a supplement to food first. And so we want to think about, when I talk with parents a lot, they might get stuck on day to day, like my child didn't eat this meal, my child didn't do well at this meal. So number one, we want to think about a week's time span. And with working with pediatricians for over 8 years, I feel like that is a pretty universal idea. Like, don't overly focus on just one particular meal by meal. It is the grand scheme of things. So things that we want to make sure we want to be cautious with is not mega dosing. So as soon as the sign of a cold and like, oh, you got to take your vitamins. Well, they do talk about like zinc being, you can curb, or the vitamin C can curb, but it's not curing. And also we want to be careful. I talk with people a lot like, oh, my child or I am on zinc every single day, and they tell me the dose. We have to be careful because it can mask other deficiencies or like the absorption. And so we just want a happy balance. And if we think about foods and ways we can incorporate them, we'll get that through our food. A couple other ones like turmeric and ginger. Turmeric is a powder, and the curcumin that makes it orange is the actual potent antioxidant. And it can be incorporated in teas. It can be making yellow rice. So you're just sprinkling some turmeric in some white rice and making it yellow. I mean, kids just see it as yellow rice. So there's different ways. It can be also in different kind of dishes, ethnic dishes also. Ginger has an interesting taste. So kids may not take ginger, but that's the type of thing that we want to think about. Different ways that we can include it. Elderberry it definitely has its benefits as a form of antioxidant. But as far as taking additional supplements, that's something that, they're still working on whether it's beneficial to actually boost the immune system. But I don't think I haven't come across like a toxic level. Just the fact that don't take it naturally too much, in high doses. So as I mentioned, like food first, I do work with a lot of kids and parents who are what we would call extremely picky eaters, whether there's a neurodivergency involved or whether there is just, RFID is termed avoidant aversion, restrictive food intake disorder. So that is almost like a fear of food. And it's usually stemming from a different reason, a different kind of anxiety, fear of choking, fear of vomiting, fear of something happened traumatically, or just general underlying anxiety about, am I going to like this? That can lead to an aversion to many foods, and that could lead to nutrient deficiencies. So I do work with this frequently. So this is where we can talk about a general day-to-day multivitamin in different ways without those mega dosings for the immune system type of thing. So, so that's kind of like my considerations when I'm working with someone individually about whether they would need, or their child would need an extra supplementation. So
Or do you
while
have
we're
any?
still working on food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any
Go.
favorite multivitamins for kids that you find are pretty clean and that kids like? I feel like I kind of go back and forth with, kids tend to like the gummies, but then we worry about their
Yeah.
teeth versus some of
Yeah.
the kind of cleaner options I've tried to give my kids in the past, and they're like, this is disgusting and chalky. Do you have any favorites that you've
Yeah.
come across?
So there's a lot out there, and one of the things that I do use personally for, because I serve adult and pediatric clients, and I
Mhm.
also so I use full script, so I know I trust the brands in there, and I
Okay.
will use. So what I look for is when I'm working with someone is what is their palate like? Can they Are they old enough to swallow a pill? If they can swallow a pill, then that's probably the easiest way. But most of the littles are not swallowing pills at this point. So do we need a powder that mixes in with food? Or is it a chewable like a Flintstones that type of form, which that's when they feel like it's chalky and they don't want to.
Yeah.
So there are different things. And then also liquid, you never know if that's going to taste like cough medicine or something like that. So,
Mhm.
so as far as brands, I really don't have a specific brand that I recommend. It's more of like learning what the child might take and kind of
Yeah.
working from there within my full script and then kind of going towards the children's version. Over the counter, and that is the big thing as far as your um gummies. You're going to get your B's and your C's and maybe some D in there, but you're not going to get calcium, you're not going to get iron in any of those gummies.
Mhm.
And also the teeth, and because that it and the other part of it is a safety as far as they're not fruit snacks, they're medicine. And that's one thing that you kind of think about is like vitamins aren't supposed to taste like candy. It is, you're kind of treating it like this is healthy for your body, but not everything is going to taste the same, like candy, like sweet. Okay.
You don't want
Um,
to open up an entire thing of gummy
I
vitamins
know,
and
I
eat them, right?
know,
That would be
I
horribly
know.
dangerous. So totally.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there are some powders that are coming out that I'm still actually looking into. Just the nutrient composition, but one that they're because I do follow an autism dietitian on
Okay.
Instagram, and there's been some few ads, and it's called Ella, but I haven't looked at the actual composition, but it mixes with food,
Cool.
and so when we work with a child with autism, we know they can detect the slightest little
Mhm.
changes. So, but that one is on my list that I do want to look up a little bit more. So yeah.
Neat.
So
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have some patients that take Haya. That's like a chewable, not a gummy, but it's monk fruit sweetened, I think. So maybe
Right. And
that
I've heard of that. And that's the thing. That's a lot of like, yeah, I see a lot of these ads coming through on social media. And one of the things I do just like to trust is that I know when I use the full script that they've been third party tested. They
Mhm.
have been, they're professional grade. And so the higher quality form of the supplement, because let's just say magnesium, for example, there's 5 different forms of magnesium and they could be, our body can utilize them a little bit differently.
Absolutely.
So,
I was just
one
reading
will
articles on that last night.
yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, that's kind of getting off the immune, but that's the type of thing that the form of magnesium, the form of calcium, the form of vitamin D that's in these supplements, I always just kind of try to take a closer look and also I use consumer labs. So I do
Okay.
look for the efficacy on consumer labs when I'm looking for certain vitamins too. So, but I have to tell you, it all goes back to, are they going to take it, right?
Mhm.
So I got a bunch of, free samples of Haya and I tried
Yeah.
it on my kids and they flat out refused. They like took a look of it and they were like, heck to the no. And that's part of what prompted my question, but they love their vitamin gummies. And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
we don't even do it
Yeah.
most days because they're pretty
Yeah.
well balanced eaters.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was just wondering, I feel like every family has a slightly different experience with what their
Yeah.
kids will and will not
Yeah.
try, accept, and ingest.
Yes, there is. So, to be honest with you, one of the brands that is over the counter that I see, is Smarty Pants. That's actually in full script.
Okay.
So
Oh,
that is something that the Smarty Pants brand, there's a variety of different ones. And of course, that's in the gummy, but they do add like even a little bit of omega-3 in some of their supplements. And typically the form of calcium is going to be calcium carbonate, but they could have like a separate calcium. Not like, again, the reason why it's not in these multivitamins is because it's a large mineral and
Mhm.
it's going to make that either swallowing a pill or making a gummy like really big. And so, and the other part of
And
it
the
is we have to think about like the absorption and how some nutrients can block the absorption of others. So,
like your
um,
iron and your calcium and everything
yeah, you
like
got
that.
it.
Yeah.
And then we go
So,
back to that vitamin C with iron to help the absorption. So yeah, yeah,
yes. Oh my
yeah,
goodness.
yeah.
All right. Oh, thank you so much, Laura. Shall we
You're
move to
welcome.
the
Yeah. Yep. Go right
All
ahead.
right. So I'm going to take the lead on this one. We're going to talk briefly about the importance of sleep as it pertains to our immune system specifically. So just as a reminder, this is from the American Academy of Pediatric. How much sleep do kids need? And as most people probably know, this varies from kid to kid, family to family, but also based on age. So our youngest kiddos will need more sleep than our older kiddos. So infants, babies under a years old, it's typically going to be 12 to 16 hours per 24-hour period. So that's going to include your overnight sleep, hopefully less interrupted than others, and naps as well. As we move into the toddler years, it's going to be 11 to 14 hours. Preschoolers, 3 to 5 years old, 10 to 13 hours per night, plus a nap or something like that. By this age is when some kids will start dropping their naps. And so if they're dropping their naps, then we actually do want that full 10 to 13 hours overnight. And then grade schoolers, so like 6-year-olds to 12-year-olds or so, are elementary to middle school. That's going to be 9 to 12 hours per night. And when we think about how early school is starting and when we have to wake up for school, that means a pretty early bedtime. So those are some things to keep in mind. And then our teenagers, 8 to 10 hours. And I don't know about you, but I don't know a whole lot of teenagers who go to bed by like 9 p.m. in order to wake up at 6 p.m. the next day,
Yeah.
right? So our teenagers, I think, are really losing out on sleep, unfortunately.
Do you see that? You have another
Oh,
admit.
yeah, let's give it a try.
Okay. And while you're doing that, I have the tweener, and thinking about 12 hours of sleep, sure, on the weekend, no problem. But yeah, getting up early. So this year with an earlier start of school, there's been some more naps coming home
Yes.
after coming home. Yeah.
Well, I don't know about you guys, but daylight savings just destroyed us. We were out of town over the weekends and yeah, everything. I mean, I think Sunday night our kids went to bed after midnight and then we had to get up at 7:30 for school. And
Yeah.
I wish I almost sent a coffee shop gift card electronically to our kids' teachers because I was like, God bless you for having, 20 kindergartners who are probably all as sleep deprived as mine or close to it.
Yeah.
But that's part of the, you do what you can with
Yep.
parenting and they'll even out over the next couple of days. But yeah, so in general, this slide here just shows how much sleep we should be aiming for our kids based on how old they are. Okay, so as it pertains to our immune system, so during nighttime sleep, this doesn't really apply to like daytime naps and stuff like that, but during our true nighttime sleep where we're going through all the different sleep phases, certain components of the immune system really rev up. So for example, there are all sorts of different molecules and cells in our bodies that take care of immunity, but cytokines, which are associated with inflammation, increase overnight and kind of help us fight infections. And this is based on the body's internal clock and sleep rhythms. And so if you think about possibly disrupting that sleep, we might be reducing the increased production of cytokines and therefore reducing our body's ability to fight infection. So just here is nightly sleep allows our body to fight a little harder and a little better. There are also some great studies specifically pertaining to sleep and vaccines. One where they actually sleep deprived people and gave them vaccines versus not sleep depriving people. And the people who were sleep deprived didn't mount as strong a response to their vaccines as the others. So what it really tells us is that if we get the kind of sleep that we need, we are setting our bodies up to work as well as they possibly can. We know that decreased sleep inhibits our immune response overall. And this is important, right? Like take influenza, for example, when we're giving our kids their flu shots, something that I don't typically counsel my families on, but might start to is, let's make sure that, after we give vaccines that we really focus on making sure that our kids are getting a good amount of sleep, just to help it be a little bit extra effective.
I never knew that. That's great information.
Yeah. Something I learned as I was researching for this particular Zest session. So
okay.
It makes sense, but I'd never actually read studies on it. And then this is a general kind of slide to show how sleep deprivation affects so many different things. You can ignore all of the alphabet soup here, but if you follow the lines way down from sleep deprivation down to all the different cells down to the bottom, if we're decreasing a lot of these antibody cells and things like that, we're increasing a bunch of inflammation and stuff. We're going to be increasing our risk of infection here.
You didn't even think about all that stuff that goes on while you're sleeping.
Yeah.
Right?
It helps regulate your appetite too. So, I mean, sleep is so important for so many different things. So hormone regulation, appetite, immune, infection, like, we need our sleep. Let's go take a nap.
We really do. I know I'm ready to go back to sleep. I might need a third cup of coffee today, but maybe with some turmeric or something.
Yes, there you go.
There you
Throw
go.
some cinnamon in your coffee. There you go.
Absolutely.
I didn't talk about cinnamon.
Still smoothie.
Yeah, there you go.
So this is a very basic slide, but I think it hammers home the very basic, obvious point is decreased sleep, decreased antibody, more illness, right? So we know too, and sorry for all the words on this slide, but I love this quote, just like when we sleep, our brain is consolidating what we've learned and consolidating our real memories from the day. What we've shown is that research also suggests that sleep strengthens our immune system's memory, like we were talking about before with developing those antibodies. Okay. So again, not just as it pertains to vaccines, but if our body's getting exposed to various viruses throughout the day, sleep allows our bodies to kind of develop long-term memory of what those germs look like so that in the future we can fight them off better. So this comes from the American Academy of Pediatrics Healthy Children website, some tips to get more sleep. And these are tips, right? it's not all going to work for every single family, but try to make sufficient sleep a priority for your family. Just like you might try to focus on less screen time, or you might try to focus on reducing plastics, or you might try to focus on all having a meal together. Sleep is another thing to consider as making a priority in your family. It can be helpful to keep a regular daily routine as much as you can, right? Just like in the morning, you probably have your steps of things that everybody needs to do to get from bed to out the door and ready for work and school. Try to have a regular daily routine as it pertains to getting ready for bed as well. Increase activity during the day. We know that the work of a child is play. That's what Mr. Rogers always taught us, right? The more kids are active during the day and the more kids are outside during the day and exposed to sunlight, that helps their circadian rhythms, that gets them worn out for sleep. As we mentioned, monitor screen time. We know the blue light from screens actually goes down directly into the part of the brain that regulates sleep. So if we have more blue light, our brain thinks the sun is still out and is going to say, wait, I don't think it's actually time for bed yet. So trying to minimize screen use, especially within an hour or two of bedtime. Another really helpful thing is creating a space that's supportive of sleep and that feels safe for children. Realize that teens require more sleep, not less. Okay. Teens are growing, they're learning a lot, they need a lot of sleep. And so doing what we can to encourage our teenagers to sleep. And I know we talk about trying to keep the same routine, but I'm also a pretty firm believer in allowing teens to sleep more over the weekends and not forcing them to get up if they don't have to let them make up a little bit and recoup some of their lost sleep throughout the week. Some other things to keep in mind, just gentle reminders from the American Academy of Pediatrics, is don't put your baby to bed with a bottle of juice, milk, or formula. Having something like that in bed can just continue to soak their teeth in all sorts of sugars and increase the risk of cavities. But having some water in bed is okay. So if your kid wakes up thirsty, it doesn't have to become this huge 20-minute ordeal of bringing them water. They just have a water cup in bed with them. And then avoid overscheduling. And this is something that's really hard in our lifestyles, I feel, is, we have our own work, kids have their school, then they have sports and maybe an instrument and all sorts of different activities. And then that doesn't really leave a whole lot of time for rest. I hear from so many families, they're getting home at 8 or 9 p.m. and they've had to eat on the go. So maybe not been able to include some of the nourishment tips that Laura just talked to us about. And then, they have some homework to finish. So then what is that, like 9 or 10 before they're even doing that? And then maybe a bath and a shower. And then it's 10 or 11 before they're actually going to sleep. And then they have to get up 7 or 8 hours later. So trying to really be mindful about the ways that we are adding things to our children's schedules and making sure, maybe even making it a priority to maybe even put in our calendars the sleep time of our children so that we can be a little bit more mentally aware and cognizant of our children's sleep and the importance of that.
It's so important, I think.
Did you see the study that came out recently that showed that not just blue light, but like any light, like even like a small light from the hallway coming into your room can decrease the quality of your sleep? Because Linda went through a phase where she wanted like a light on, and now and I'll tell her we're not having any light. You don't understand, but it does interfere with your sleep. And she's like, okay.
Yeah.
So, 2 minutes
I think that's so important because I think about like my daughter never really got used to a nightlight, and she can, like, if there's a light on in the hall, she's like, can you turn that off? So I mean that part is good. But these things have started, like directing an hour before, and that's where I know that, and when I work with so many teenagers, that you definitely hear it. And everything you just spoke about, like all the schedules and then still doing homework and then going and, I got to get my gaming in too. So I got to get that in. And like kids are going to bed at like 3 a.m. and then thinking that they can wake up, and they're wondering why both their eating habits, their energy, everything is all
it's a vicious cycle.
Whack. Yeah. Yeah.
They get sick and everything gets thrown off.
Yeah. And to the point of starting as a baby, though, I think, we've all had conversations about this, that the sleep, like the self-soothing, let the baby go to sleep. How do you know the baby is hungry when they wake up for milk? What if you pat it on the back versus giving some nourishment that then actually they take a break from that sleep, and now they're taking that, plus it is laying on their mouth, and sure, they're going to lose those teeth, but at the same time, we don't have
that in there for another talk, Haley.
Yeah, Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
sleep
think
in and
that
of
whole
itself is
circadian rhythm and that sleep schedule, starting at an infant, is just so important. And, I work with kids on one side, like gaming all night, but babies at the same time, if they, if they just get a little restless and then need to, just kind of self-soothe and go fall back asleep, we don't need to necessarily add nourishment. And I do actually find that sometimes the parents will say, oh, they don't want to eat in the morning. Well, they had 2 or 3 bottles overnight, and so that's one
yeah.
reason.
And being mindful, right? Like, of course, we all know like the newborns and everything should be eating in the middle of the night. But
Yeah.
as we get to like the 6 month and older
Yeah.
babies, right, it becomes less important if the baby's growing well and everything. And so, yeah, I always, Dr. Quattrone, you probably do the same thing, but I always try to talk about that at the 6, 9, 12-month kind of visits of, looking at how well the baby is growing and asking about sleep and nighttime awakenings and figuring out a way to, what's normal, what's not normal, ways we can improve everything for everybody. So, absolutely. All right. All right, Dr. Marissa, you want to talk a little bit about
Vaccines.
vaccines?
Yes. So of
I
course,
felt like we had to include this, right? Especially with
well,
everything going on right now.
yes, there's no more surefire way to build immunity than through vaccination. So you get a little, that's pretty little idea, the recommended childhood
Mhm.
schedule there. So, if you want to go to the next slide, I think
Yeah.
it mentions life before vaccines, and I have the pleasure of working with an older gentleman doctor at Children's, and he would tell me about how he would see these things, particularly Haemophilus and the meningitis, and how sick these babies were, and how they would come in the ER and they would be very ill in the ICU or maybe not make it. And he saw all that, and luckily, in the times that we've trained, we haven't as much because of vaccination. And so, thinking about these numbers, and what would happen if some of these things do start to come back, such as you could see measles on there, 4 million children in the US every year, and 500 children would die from measles before vaccines, 10,000 children a year paralyzed from polio. So these are some staggering numbers. I mean, even pertussis. Yeah, older kids get pertussis. Maybe, it's not so bad for them, but 8,000 infants used to pass away before vaccines. So we haven't seen it. And that's why sometimes I think it's easier to, in the world that some parents may be skeptical or have questions. But data like this really makes you think.
Yeah. I think a couple other things too is like with pertussis, right? We think about it as the cough and the constant cough, but what kills a lot of
Mhm.
babies is the apnea or lack of breathing, like in the middle of the night, right? They just stop breathing, which is
Right.
terrifying. Like you wouldn't wake up just because of a coughing, or you would wake up if it were just a coughing fit, but if your baby just stops breathing, you might not know. And then thinking about measles, right? Like sure, 500 die, and that's 500 too many, but there's also the deafness and the blindness. And then
Yeah.
oh gosh, the term is escaping me right now, but like where your body like basically forgets its immune system,
Did you
right?
see Dr. Nowak, infectious disease doctor from children, posted about the complication that can happen years after a measles
Yes,
infection? It's a serious neurologic
also
complication.
that, also
So
that.
Wow.
it's not all just
Yeah.
immediate. It's like, okay, well, maybe you had measles and you made it, but there are things that can happen down the line too.
Yeah.
So
But the fact that measles can also make our immune systems forget the other things that it's been exposed to, and like, I mean, that's just
yeah,
terrifying. So you're just
Wow.
opening up this
9.
can of worms, right?
So
Yeah.
I have a question for you both. What about when you have somebody message you or ask you, what is your approach on the conservative schedule? So,
Mhm.
or the delayed schedule. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we're lucky in the way that we practice. So, if you guys don't know, Zest is a direct care practice, completely different model than your traditional model. We have small patient panels, and we can really spend time with our families. And I have spent an hour or sometimes 2 hours with families presenting real data and, vaccine inserts. And, unfortunately, I think misinformation is a lot more readily available out there. And you have these ideas, and once they're presented to you, it's hard to get them out of your head. So, there was the study where measles MMR vaccine caused autism, and yeah, that doctor falsified his data, he lost his license, but once the idea is out there, it's hard for people to let go of. So we know for sure it's settled science The MMR vaccine does not cause autism. Autism is, I did autism work full time for years, and I still do it part time. And I see children who are vaccinated with autism, who are not vaccinated with autism, and I see, hundreds of different genetic mutations associated with autism. And so we have a lot to learn about why some kids' brains are wired differently and things like that. These different questions that come up regarding vaccines. But, essentially, we're able to have these discussions, and we're able to continue having these discussions, and we're able to find a place where the parents feel comfortable. And not only that, but it's not like we have crowded waiting rooms. So while we're, figuring this out, or we're doing an alternative schedule, we can go to their homes. So while we, and I think Haley would agree, we're pediatricians, we believe in vaccines, and my child's fully vaccinated. We get our flu vaccines. We're able to have these discussions with people. And as long as we have, a mutually respectful relationship overall, it's something that we can, figure out together.
Yeah. And just to put a quick plug in for the CDC recommended schedule, right? I always promise my patients, and I think Marissa probably does too, directly or indirectly, I would never recommend anything that I wouldn't do for my own children, right?
Mm-hmm.
And thinking about, I'm not an expert in every single thing as it pertains to pediatrics, but I know how to find the information from the people who are those experts. And the CDC is one such place, right? And so I trust the information that comes out of the CDC and the reasoning behind those recommendations. So, a lot of people, I think one of the biggest concerns that people have is, can my baby handle it? Or is it too much too soon? Well, if we look, or another one is, well, we're giving so many more vaccines than we were back in the 80s and 90s, right? So one thing to think about is the vaccines that we had in the 80s and 90s had a lot more antigen per vaccine. We're talking thousands instead of like dozens. And so each vaccine that we're giving now actually has less antigen, or less kind of like germ that we're putting in to the bodies. And then we have more vaccines because we've discovered more ways to protect people. So it's a good thing. If you take all of the vaccines we give nowadays and compare it to a couple vaccines we gave back in the 80s, our kids are still getting exposed to less parts of germs than they were back in the day. It's still less than if they were to lick a doorknob or lick a toy in the office.
Right.
So we try to clean it. So they can absolutely handle it. I firmly believe that vaccines are safe and that they are effective. I think vaccines are a great first line defense against these infectious diseases. And then when combined with healthy eating, mindful eating, adequate sleep, and all sorts of other things, basic hygiene, of course, I think we kind of put all the pieces together to keep our families healthy.
I think the fact that you both, in the Zest way of the discussion, and people you always hear on, whether it's Facebook, social media, whatever, I want somebody who's listening, who will listen to me. I want to understand it, versus like the blanket, like, I just need somebody to do this for me. I need them to hear me. Like everything that you both just described, like, it's like I did the same thing with my daughter. I'm like, I'm going to trust the doctor that they're going to do this, and I'm going to, I'm going to go along with their schedule. I didn't question it, but there's a lot of people who do. But the way that you both just described how your approach is, and the science to back it up, it's like, okay, I mean, even if that person still leaves thinking, well, maybe not, they still question it. At least they've been heard, and you've had that discussion with them.
I can't tell you how many times parents have come in and said, I asked my doctor this question or that question. They just said, because I said so, or I don't know if it was exactly like that, but that's how it came off to them. And it's like, how can you expect people to just trust you and not be able to listen and hear them and sit down and and I mean, in a traditional practice, a lot of times you just don't have time, and maybe that's part of it. I've been there, done that. And that's why, we're doing what we do now. Right, Haley?
That's exactly why we're here, so that we can pull out the vaccine inserts. We don't just have 12 minutes for a visit. We have an hour if we can take that time.
Right. And we can answer those questions, and not just say, you just have to trust me, or you just have to listen to me. We can actually sit there and have those conversations. So it's great.
Absolutely. All right, let me move over to the next slide. Do you want to go over this a little bit, Dr. Marissa?
Absolutely. So kind of how you alluded to it. So vaccines, we have a couple of live vaccines. So the MMR, the chickenpox, those are live vaccines. There was the nasal form of the flu. I don't know if anyone's using that anymore. That was a live vaccine, but most of them are just a piece of the germ, just the piece that makes your body recognize the germ itself, whether it's a virus or bacteria. And it sparks the immune system. You develop the antibodies, and they just lay in wait in your immune system, which is so cool. And then if you're actually exposed to that full germ in real life, the body can respond, and you may not get sick at all, or you hopefully wouldn't get as sick as if you didn't have the vaccine. So it's pretty cool.
I like to describe it as like soldiers. So the vaccine, we're just taking the face of the soldier so that our bodies can recognize them, but there's nothing about the face that can hurt you. We don't have any of the ammunition or the swords or anything like that. But then your body can recognize those bad guys' faces when they're actually there and fight them off when it's actually time for battle. So I don't know, that seems to work for a lot of families, but I think the point is, right, is like we're exposing your body in advance, but we're not hurting your body. You can't get hurt. Like you can't get the disease from the vaccine.
Right.
Absolutely. So yeah, I mean, we already talked, I feel like we've said this already several times, but a combination, right, of healthy diet, nightly sleep, vaccines, all sorts of great things that you can do to help promote your child's immune system, your own immune system, right? This applies to all of us. This applies to adults too. We all need to eat well, exercise. We didn't really talk too much about exercise, but exercise is great as well. Sleep well. I know I need to sleep better, probably turn off the light, not use my phone as much, do more during the day, right? Like
let's get outside today, right?
Nice. Yeah.
Get outside.
70 degrees out today.
A walk on the trail is in my future at about 4 o'clock today. So
I love it. I love it. So all these things and more to help keep us safe and healthy.